I want to talk about rampant Whorfianism. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is the idea that the language you speak or languages you speak, again, this is already presupposes that languages are, etc. But the languages you speak condition the way you see the world, right? So typically, scholars distinguish between the strong hypothesis and the weak hypothesis, even though neither Sapir nor Whorf did distinguish between these two senses, right? Yeah. Nor did they formulate something called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. But anyway, so the strong hypothesis is that language determines thought, and the weak hypothesis is that language conditions to a minor extent thought, right? And so, and nowadays, strong Whorfianism is mostly marginalized in the scholarly literature, but weak Whorfianism is not. And outside the scholarly literature, strong Whorfianism continues to be very, very much supported by a lot of members of the Polyglot community. Have you come across this? What are your thoughts on why do you think this has happened?
Well, you know, there used to be a time when saying that you have many different personalities was a problem, right? They would put you into an asylum. Right. And nowadays, on social media, you can say when you speak different languages, you have different personalities, and you are applauded for that, right? Yeah, yeah, There's been a change there, and you know, this is just pure mysticism. I think I've grown to be a rather materialist kind of person, and when I see people saying that they experience the world in a different way, they have different personalities in different languages. First of all, we would need to clarify what a personality is. You using different gestures and different words is a personality. Well, that's
and also what a worldview is, because for you to see the world in different ways, you must have an accurate conception of what a worldview is and how that shifts across languages, supposedly, right? So, yeah, absolutely.
And that also leads to this other idea, right? Like, of course, when you speak a different language, you are changing something, and you know, it's very subjective what these people say they are experiencing. So I'm just not gonna I'm not gonna talk about their subjective nonsense, whatever. But it's true that, for example, if you speak Chinese, you start behaving in a bit of a different way. For example, now I'm already indoctrinated into Chinese culture, and when you see a foreigner speaking well Chinese, you say, "说得真的好啊，厉害厉害." Like, "Oh, you're fucking amazing, man! It's incredible." You said "ni hao," you said "hello," right? Yeah. So but that's not the language controlling me, pulling strings and controlling me. That's the culture, and I think that most of the things that people self-describe as the language changing the way they see things is just culture. Yeah, you are seeing things differently because now you have this other new perspective on life.
Definitely, that's a point I think John McWhorter makes in The Language Hoax.
Okay, yeah,
in the book, and I think he makes that argument very conspicuously, and yeah, it's a very, and he also speaks about chance, which I thought was very interesting. So we have this idea that, as you said, with the metaphor of the strings, right? I think there is causalism in the polyglot community, as in presuming that every word and every bit of a language has to have a reason why behind, and has to be the cause to an effect. And sometimes language evolution, some aspects happen by chance, just like they happened in human evolution and the evolution of animals and living beings, etc. Right? And also, I think that a reason why Whorfianism is so popular in the polyglot community is because of what I call polyglot hype, which is the fact that it just sounds better. It's a form of wishful thinking, right? Uneducated wishful thinking, or what in philosophy of science is called the inference to the loveliest explanation. This sounds the loveliest, therefore it must be true. It would be great if we could see the world in 7,000 different ways, therefore it must be true, right? As opposed to the inference to the best explanation. And
that also is something that, there's a lot of people trying to save languages, right?
Yes.
Dying languages. And there's this recurrent argument that when you lose a language, you lose a point of view, right? These kinds of ideas, like, nowadays Mexican language is gonna die, and we're not gonna be able to connect with Pachamama and whatever. No, thanks. I'm not buying it.
That's a recurring trope, definitely, in the polyglot community. And I think the mistake stems from the very idea of saving languages, which presupposes this savior complex, whomever exerts that, right? So
that happens.
And
also,
go ahead.
Before we move on to the next point, there's something to this idea that people are self-describing these experiences, and I'm not going to assume they're just crazy, right? There's something going on there. Part of it may be that they're just mistaking culture and what the influence of grammar. But I think there's also a lot of psychological factors involved. So one example is when people say, "Oh, when I speak Spanish, I'm just so much open and whatever." I think that a good explanation for those kinds of experiences would be the fact that you're now speaking a new language, and with a new language comes no baggage, no emotional baggage. So we are both Spanish, and if I say to you "feo," which you are not, okay, don't worry, it's fine. But if I say "feo," it's not the same that go up to you and say "你很丑," right? "丑" in Chinese is also ugly, and you don't have any emotion or past experience attached to that "丑" word. So for you, it's not going to affect you as much. And if you are a very what's the word? Someone who has a lot of emotional baggage attached to the language, you move to this new language. Suddenly, you are not inhibited in the same way you are in your own language.
I think that you make a very interesting point by saying that people do have these experiences. Not that people just dream them up, right? They do have these experiences that feel as though they have different personalities. They think in a language. That's also very commonly reported trope.
Okay.
Oh, now I'm finally able to think in French after 7 years, and now I think in German, which, as Steven Pinker explained, right, in the Language Instinct, is something true at the phenomenological level. The individual does experience this, but phenomenology is not an evidence, right? Just because you experience something, it does not mean that it has true reality to it. So yes, it feels as though we think in a language, but actually thinking in an entire language will take so much computational load, it will be absurd. We have to think in something pre-linguistic, something conceptual, and then label those thoughts with one language or another. And so the first language in which we label those thoughts feels as if it were the medium of our thinking, right? But it's just the first labeling stage. And the same goes for personality, as you explained, and other forms of Whorfianism.